Hello and welcome to my early access preview of Skyfront VR on behalf of Kustom Gaming Community. Join our community group on Facebook at the link in the description for more gaming news or to play with us. We're an inclusive, friendly group for all platforms, just here to have fun. Skyfront VR is an early access VR FPS game available for the PC, compatible with the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift and Windows Mixed Reality headsets. Developed by Levity Play, it is billed as a fast-paced multiplayer FPS built exclusively for VR. It's currently available on Steam for £15.49 and there have also been a few recent sales at up to 50% off. For some context to my experience for this review, I'm a long-time PC gamer and I've had an HTC Vive for almost 2 years now. I've got my VR legs, so I don't really experience motion sickness anymore, and so I won't be able to comment on Levity Play's claims that the game is completely nausea-free. I've played a lot of pancake FPS franchises on PC over the years, both single and multiplayer, such as Quake, Unreal Tournament, Serious Sam, Half-Life 2 Deathmatch, and TF2.
In VR, I've played most of the wave shooters and games like Arizona Sunshine and Sorrento.
However, Skyfront is the first VR FPS I've played where the movement is 0G or uses grappling hooks. My PC spec is in the description, and I should also note that I received my copy of the game for free for this preview. VR or FPS veterans will immediately grasp Skyfront's basics.
In many ways it's a standard sci-fi multiplayer FPS with the added twists of being in zero gravity and therefore with all 3 linear degrees of freedom.
One of the weapons you can select simply thrusts you in the direction you aim at, enabling you to move in any direction you can point. Once you've jumped into the tutorial and gotten grips with the controls, you'll quickly get to moving all through the maps, taking shots up, down and all around at your enemies. Graphics are simple looking but bright and functional. I personally like this in FPSs rather than realistic looking textured browns and dirty greys. A bit of contrast and not too much detail.
In VR, this also helps with the relatively low-res images that today's HMDs offer, and it keeps everything looking pleasingly crisp, which makes it very easy to identify players and see what's going on.
Sound is functional but nothing special yet. 3D audio seems to be working, which is massively important in this game, but I don't think any echoes or environmental effects have been applied yet. Having the sounds bounce around and get muffled by obstructions realistically is something I'd really like to see here, as I think it adds a lot to immersion and gameplay. The weapons are also functional but nothing special. It seems all weapons are projectile, there's no hit-scan railguns or similar yet I think, so you have to lead your targets at range. They are very well designed for VR use with clear ammo displays and sights. Each gun only has a primary fire, but after selecting 2 to use in your loadout you can dual wield in any combination. Some weapons can be charged too. For example, with the guided rocket launcher you can fire the whole mag at once, and there are special abilities you can bind to each hand, like a shield or X-ray vision, so in any single moment you have plenty of options at your disposal. I feel like improvements to the sound could really add to the feel of the weapons, and I believe a melee weapon is also planned, which would be immensely satisfying to use. I've already touched on the basics of movement, but there's actually a lot more going on.
For a start, there's a timed boost on the thruster you can use to speed up.
While getting the hang of the game, I tended to use a single thruster in my left hand to navigate, boosting occasionally, while shooting with my right hand. This worked fine, but you'll find it's a bit slow, especially since the air resistance seems pretty high. Once weapon switching starts to feel natural though, it's easy to double this speed and still be effective by simply using both hands.
But to get any real speed, you'll need to master the grappling hooks. Use of this mechanic is an area where I think Skyfront VR can really appeal to competitive players. On first using them, I was somewhat disappointed. Sure, they get you to where you point quick, but their limited range and the fact that they literally deposit you right at the wall you hook to disappointed me at first. It seemed like they were just useful if you needed to get to a nearby wall quickly and then stop there.
I'd already had a tip to try using 2 to propel myself between walls or through doorways, which works well, but this was pretty tricky and it also seemed limited to me. However, I remembered my science. What about thrusting perpendicular to the hook's pull direction, I thought.
It was really easy to get the hang of this manoeuvre once it had occurred to me, and with practice, map knowledge and good aim, I'm sure it could be effectively chained across and between structures.
What's more, you can do this with a single hand whilst laying down death with the other. This trick really opened up the game for me, and suddenly I could see the fast-paced claim having some real merit. What's more, I'm pretty sure that with skill and practice you could really mix this up by using both hands. I can see hook tricks being this game's equivalent of Quake's bunny hopping, an effective movement technique with a high skill ceiling which will really reward the serious players and give the relatively casual players something to work towards too. Skyfront VR has 3 maps currently with more planned. They're sufficiently varied with no obvious problems. I'd like something space themed though, perhaps around a space station in orbit. So other than some areas that could use some polish, which will no doubt get addressed as the game moves through early access, there's not a lot I would change about Skyfront VR.
One minor gripe I had was that, given the zero gravity environment, I would have really liked a full 6 degrees of freedom.
However, it's entirely possible this would cause sickness, and I'm not really sure how or even if it could be implemented well. On a similar note, I'd like the ability to grab onto the scenery and propel or orientate myself this way as well. These ideas would fundamentally change the game though, so it's entirely valid not to use them if they're simply not a part of the intended experience. The only significant issue I had playing the game during my time was the player count. Checking Steam stats tells me there's currently an average of about 10 players in game, but I could only find people to play with about half of that time. Sometimes there was literally no one, or sometimes there were private games going on, or just a few loners sitting AFK in lobbies. This is a problem for all but the biggest multiplayer FPSs, and this one being in VR and early access just makes it even more niche. However, Levity Play are doing a lot to fight the problem. They have the game in several VR arcades across Europe, and this provides a steady trickle of usually unskilled players to practice your moves against. They also advertise a daily happy hour in-game, have in-game events such as a recent Halloween one, and encourage players to join their Discord, which can be used to rally some skilled opposition. The Discord group is friendly, and you should be able to coordinate a game pretty easily. You can also play against bots, but they provide almost no challenge at all once you've learned the basics of movement and weapons.
I'm sure better bots are planned though, and I really think these could help with the player count.
Currently, after your first 10 minutes against them, there's basically no reason to be in-game if you don't have a real player to play against, unless you really want to test something or you really want to practice. But if they were made more fun and challenging and used the same avatar and weapons as players, I think people would be happy to play against them whilst waiting for others to join. Also, currently it's bots or players. Once we can fill empty slots with player-like bots, which real players can then replace, more people will stick around longer and then end up playing against each other. But when there were active players, I had a blast. Getting a 6-1 KD against the arcade noobs and occasionally helping them is pretty fun when it happens, but importantly, getting a 1-6 KD against skilled players is also fun. Shout out to Black from the game's Discord, who hopped into a game I was dominating against some new players. By now I had my single hand to hook and thrust with quick movement moved pretty sorted and I was showing it off. But then there he was, just zipping about with at least twice my speed and 4 times the precision, and a few tricks I hadn't worked out. Check out his Steam game guide linked in the description for some idea of some of the things possible and more detail of some of the game's specifics. I think he honed in on me as being the not quite entirely unskilled player there, my Steam name not being known arcade may also have helped, and he pulled a few cool tricks and kills on me. But I never felt cheated by my deaths. Sometimes I didn't know exactly what had happened, but it always felt like I'd been outplayed or outskilled. As an aside, some kind of kill cam option might be a great addition here, perhaps on a 2D screen projection to prevent motion sickness.
In conclusion, Skyfront VR is a fun multiplayer FPS with some interesting twists on that formula to get your attention. Its simple controls and maps and bright colours will appeal to casuals, while its high skill ceiling will also appeal to more competitive players. All of the basic building blocks are in place for a great multiplayer experience, but currently they're just that basic.
During my time in the game I encountered almost no bugs, which is very encouraging, and hopefully, through early access, the game will be fleshed out while not losing sight of the things it already does very well. However, as it stands, if you're looking for a full game experience with the low player count, I can't recommend it at its full price. If the concept particularly intrigues you, or you want to support hard-working devs, then sure. Otherwise, for now, I'd keep an eye on it and wait for a sale, or wait for the full release or some updates or more players. If they can get to the point where there's at least a few players to play against 90% of the time, then I'd say this is a recommendation if it's your kind of game. For now though, I'd say in a 50% off sale, the game is just about worth it, so long as you don't mind having to work a little bit to find opponents.